I participated in the freedom fights of the day between Washington, D.C. and Baltimore, Maryland. I heard Dr. King preach at the Cornerstone Baptist Church in Baltimore. And when I heard that the pastor, Dr. I. Logan Kears, had gone to a restaurant to eat and was arrested, I became incensed. And I went out to the Jackie Robinson Youth Council of the NAACP and signed up and started demonstrating on Saturdays. I was told by my family not to go to the demonstrations. I did not understand what they said at the time. I did not tell them what I was going to do. I simply did what I was going to do. I went every Saturday morning at 5 o'clock, and we demonstrated all over the area, including Annapolis and the Eastern Shore. And I did experience dogs barking and a lot of Caucasians gathering and shouting epithets at us. Now, my regret about that time is that I was very young and not old enough to go to jail. We were told that we had to separate ourselves. The younger people could go into the restaurant and sit, wait to be invited out by the police, get the signs, and demonstrate in front of the restaurant. But those who were of age could stay in the restaurant and be arrested. Being young, if I had been arrested, I would have been singled out and separated at the jail. And then I would have been subject to all kinds of atrocities because there would not have been anybody to protect me. Therefore, I could not be arrested, and I regretted not being able to go to jail at that time. But I was incensed that our ministers, who we looked up to in that day, could go to a restaurant and simply want to eat a meal and be put in jail for that. I remember when we would travel south, if we came from areas in the north, when we reached Washington, we had to be separated, especially on the train, to a very horrible car to go south. And it was segregated. It was integrated in the north at that time. Everybody rode in the same cars, and the cars were not all bad. But when you went south, the seats were hard, they were no longer plush, and we were, as I said, segregated all the way down south, North Carolina, in my family's case. And then coming back, when you got to D.C., you could change and get into a better car, going points north. I remember Mother Parks, as I call her, and her great sacrifice and how the people spoke about it. But the older people were frightened. I realized after many years that my family had migrated to the north, so-called D.C. and Baltimore and Philadelphia and New York and Boston. They had seen lynchings. They had had relatives disappear. As I realized, my grandmother had a brother who disappeared and was never heard of again. So this is why they were afraid for us and did not want us to demonstrate. Many people and ministers did not get involved with the civil rights struggle. And as you may have heard, our major Baptist convention, the National Baptist Convention, split over the issue of civil rights. The majority of the ministers did not want to participate. They did not want to support it. They felt that we would go into these little quiet meetings and try to get things changed that had not changed for hundreds of years. But some of the younger ministers said no. Some of the older ministers agreed with them. Hence, we had the Progressive National Baptist Convention. And here in D.C., two of the major churches to become a part of the Progressive National Baptist Convention was the Metropolitan Baptist Church, where Dr. E.C. Smith was the pastor, and my church, the Shiloh Baptist Church, where Dr. Earl Harrison was the minister. In fact, when Dr. Earl Harrison died, he was the sitting president of the Progressive National Baptist Convention. They just met here in Washington this year. And that convention is referred to as the Convention of King, because in Atlanta, the King family, of course, went in with the new convention, because the new convention supported civil rights. In 1955, we were all in the same neighborhoods. The doctors, the lawyers, the dentists, the morticians, the factory workers, the street workers, we were all there together in our block on Harvard Street. Many of the people were homeowners. And we've had one man, Mr. Myers, who worked at the White House at the time. He worked there for many years. And one family, where they started off humble from Vermont Avenue Baptist Church, and the children ended up getting good education, going to work for the government. One lady became a teacher and then a principal. And we shopped at the stores in our own neighborhood. Our ice was just as cold as the ice with the Caucasian man. But you see, I was fighting for the end to desegregation. I was not an integrationist, but integration came about. I'll explain that. I wanted segregation to end so that we could go where we wanted to go. Go to any restaurant, any store. You know, we were prevented from going to a lot of the stores downtown at one time. One left early, Palais Royal, was taken over by Woodward and Luther, commonly known as Woody's. One of the last stores to end segregation was Garfinkel's. And for many years, I wouldn't buy even a pencil out of Garfinkel's because of that. Our people could go in there and run the elevator and work in the kitchen, but they could not work behind the counter, and you couldn't go in there and buy clothes. They did not realize at that time that money is green and green is good all over the world. But eventually, the segregation ended, and that's what I wanted. Now, as far as the integration, I was not for hooking up with the Caucasian if they did not want to befriend me. I didn't want to try to make a friend of them or to make them my bosom buddy. I still don't. So that's why I say I was for end to segregation, but not necessarily for integration.
Okay. And so you were saying, basically, it sounds like what you're saying about the classes, the fact that all different types of people lived
in the same community.
Okay.
In terms of our own African American people, and I refer to myself as African American back when we were being called colored and Negroes. I was African American, and we lived together, and we didn't think that one person was greater than the other person. But now it's different. Money has made the difference. If you've got the money and the good credit, then of course you can go up on what is known as the Ivory Coast, 16th Street, the Gold Coast, the Platinum Coast. That wasn't in existence back in '55, as you asked me. We were in the same communities. We were near Howard University, and many of the people in our block were people who had gone to Howard and who had gotten degrees and advanced degrees and degrees that were just as good as a degree from Harvard. And people respected each other, they spoke to each other, and they welcomed each other into the various homes, especially if it was time of sickness or bereavement. But now it is different. Because of class, you've got Anacostia, and many of the people of the lower socioeconomic strata living in Anacostia, and people of the middle and upper economic strata living in Northwest, Upper Northwest, and Montgomery County. And of course, there are those sections in Prince George's County, but also a lot of the poor people have entered Prince George's County, hence it is called, what is it, the 9th Ward? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Now, I want to talk a little bit more about segregation. And you mentioned it. What can you recall specifically about segregation? Because you made a statement, you wanted it into segregation because you wanted African Americans to be able to do what they wanted to do. What are some of the...
I'll give you a case in point. Mm-hmm. There was a eatery, and we were not supposed to go in there to sit down to be served. There were drugstores, both in D.C. and in Baltimore, that had lunch counters all over the city. It was People's Chain here in D.C. and Reed's Chain in Baltimore. And you could go to the back window and get your lunch in a bag and come out the door. But you couldn't sit down at the counter. Now, things changed first in D.C. before Baltimore. And then there was one eatery where this was not supposed to happen. And in defiance, one of my best friends, with whom I still talk, and I went into one of the eateries. He was afraid to demand to be served, but I demanded to be served, and I ordered a soda. And they prepared my fountain drink soda and served me, and I sat there and drank it. But this was my effort at desegregating the place. But the soda still was not as good as the soda at Sugar Bowls at the corner of Georgia and Harvard. Still was not as good. And there are those people who may be looking and listening who will remember Sugar Bowls and those good fountain sodas and the good French fries.
Okay.
But of course, there came a time when some of our people felt that the ice was much better at the Caucasian man's store.
Why do you think that is?
I think it was psychological conditioning. We stopped going to the stores in our neighborhood to buy goods and services and ran downtown. And the same thing has happened now. We don't go downtown, we go out to the shopping mall. And it has caused economic deprivation, first of all in our community, and now downtown, in many cities. You always think that the grass is greener on the other side.